We would like to welcome everyone to Branders Magazine new podcast, Talking with Branders, a new way to learn about branding from the best branders of the globe. BrandersMagazine.com is an online publication specialized in branding, strategy, and innovation. Branders Group teaches strategy professionals how to grow their business through branding and is an excellent source for those who want to learn about the latest industry trends and how to build a strong customer following. I'm here today with best-selling author, customer experience expert, and chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose. So let's get started.
Sure, I'm ready.
Okie dokie. So the first question that we have for you is, what is the storytelling in branding for Robert Rose? And what's the difference between the brand story and the brand stories?
Well, it's a great question. In many cases as business practitioners, marketers, one of the things that we often get wrapped up in is our brand. And of course we should, in terms of what differentiates us in the marketplace, what our brand stands for, what our purpose is, the larger problems we're trying to solve for customers. The challenge, of course, is separating out that idea from the stories that we want to tell. Because when we start with the brand, we start from the idealized, right? What did we've already achieved? We claim something, right? So if we're Nike, for example, we go out and we say, we are for and celebrate athletics and athletes. And we are about celebrating the excellence in athletes and what they do. What we don't do is introduce the struggle to get there. And every great story has a struggle, has a tension that, in other words, a journey that we're going to be taken on. And so the brand stories, possessive, the apostrophe there, the brand stories are really all of the stories that we want to tell that talk through the journey of getting there to this idealized nature of what the brand stands for. And so what we want to do is structure those things in a way that we can tell powerful, interesting, engaging stories that aren't necessarily about us or about our brand, but rather how our idealized claim of the brand can be realized if you just follow the path that we want you to take. That's the real difference. When we think about that in real life, it's just making sure that what we're doing are telling stories that are powerful to the customer, not just what we want to say to the customer.
That's very interesting. That's a great explanation. Robert, thank you. So in this case, are those companies terms that you're mentioning a trend in marketing, or what are those? Or what about
Yeah. I mean, storytelling has a little bit of a buzz about it these days. It's become a bit of a buzzword in marketing and company circles. You know, we're all storytellers. We're telling stories, storytelling, stories. It's almost lost its meaning. It's gotten so much buzz of late. But it is truly an important thing, especially in a time like this that we find ourselves in the world that we find ourselves right now. Getting powerful communication through the idea of stories, visual storytelling, creating powerful narratives for our customers and not always trying to sell to them is something that is just really important in today's marketing strategy. And so, yes, it's a buzzword, but yes, it's also a core concept that, if appropriated well, will pay, huge dividends for any brand that really goes down that road.
That's a really great point. And it's actually, I have another question following that question, or your answer,
Sure.
I should say. And it's kind of like something that we have seen as well for the past few years, the commonly known term known as the hero story. Among storytellers, basically shift the focus on your business to make the customer the hero of your story. Is this something that's relevant in brand-driven storytelling marketing, or is there a better way to explain why it's so important to focus on your customer or on your community, especially now, in times like now, instead of your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's, so Joseph Campbell, who is certainly one of my heroes, is really the author and originator of the idea of the hero's journey,
Mhm.
and certainly the story structure that has that comes along with it, the power of myth and the power of storytelling, and all of the things he wrote over his many, many, many years. And I encourage anybody to go down the path of studying Joseph Campbell. It's fantastic. But it does, yes, apply to business story as well, because when Campbell talked about the hero's journey, what he was really talking about is that idea of the journey I was explaining just a minute ago that we want to take our customers on, right? So through that idea of tension and struggle and adventures, coming through to the other side of being changed forever is what we're hoping for, right? That's what every brand hopes for, is that we recognize a customer in a before state and we take them through a journey that gives them an after state, right? Which in the after state, hopefully being something better. They can do something they couldn't do before. They believe in something they didn't believe in before. They are capable. They are, more beautiful. They are, giving more people happiness. Whatever that change state is what we're really after as brands. And the hero's journey is a great construct for that, really taking that, customer through. Now, having said that, Joseph Campbell didn't write it for marketing. He didn't write it for business. He wrote it for, the creation of myth or the creation of fiction stories. And so I think there are ways to look at that. And there's plenty of, other people out there that talk about the idea of hero's journey and business and marketing. But you're absolutely right. Putting that customer as the hero, putting that customer as the hero of your journey is the great starting point, right? Because for most businesses, really the hero of all of our stories is the customer we're looking to change.
That's a very clear explanation, Dave. Thank you. Robert, I have one question that we usually get from all of our readers. What's Robert Rose's best advice on how to build successful storytelling? Any tips that you can give us?
Well, sure. I think probably the first thing is that if you always start with a human, right, which is a really good just rule to follow. In other words, nobody wants to hear the story of hubcaps or industrial manufacturing or of marketing or of, your product. Nobody wants to hear the story of that. What they want to hear the story of is Bill or Margaret or Mario or whoever it is, a person that is going to be taken through a journey. That's where a story always starts. And the second thing I would say is, don't forget that story and narrative are two different things. What I mean by that is there's a story which encompasses everything that you want to say, your truth, what it is, the journey you want to take everybody through. The narrative is the way you want to tell that story. Now, is the way you want to tell it through video, through social, through a blog, through a university, through a feature film, through a TV show. That narrative becomes very specific. And making sure that you're smart on both, that you start with story and then you apply the right narrative to whatever that story is. Don't try and tell the same story across every medium. It doesn't work very well, and you've seen it before, right? You see a movie and you're like, this was a much better book, right? But where the movie really works is where you've actually used the strength of video or used the strength of a movie in this case to actually tell a different narrative using the same story as an anchor point. And I think if you just make sure that you understand that those two things are different and always start with a human, your customer at the start of it, you'll be on a great track to tell great stories.
That's an excellent advice. And I feel that since everyone's going on social right now, especially now, everyone's turning to social channels to sell themselves or to sell whatever products they're doing. You see that across all social media, across all different type of communication and type of platforms. So yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
I do have one last question. Can you give us an example of one or two brands that you think that are absolutely killing it with brand-driven storytelling? And if you have one that they're not doing so great, it could be like a public company that everyone knows, but it's something that you feel like throughout your years of experience that, they could have done a better job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll give you two really good ones here. You know, there's one that's relatively famous brand, Patagonia, who I think do an amazing job of brand storytelling. Some of the things that they're doing, the blogs that they're creating, the content documentary pieces that they're creating, all about life in the outdoors, loving nature, and all of those things are really powerful storytelling, and it's being driven by the Patagonia brand. And I think it's just an excellent example of someone who's taking a purpose, a true purpose, which is conservancy of nature, and transforming it into powerful storytelling that helps illustrate and demonstrate the purpose of the brand. The second one that I would notice is a B2B company. Of course, it's SAP. Big B2B, obviously, software company, global company. They recently did, and they're trying to introduce this idea of artificial intelligence and software into the world through their Leonardo product. And one of the things that they did was they launched a podcast. And they did this amazing podcast, a 7-episode series podcast called Searching for Salih. And the idea is that it was this wonderful story about this guy. It was mysterious, sort of a Dan Brown kind of mystery where you're trying to figure out what's going on, and they travel across the world, and there's a character, and along the way, they learn about what machine learning is, what artificial intelligence is. A fantastic way to make artificial intelligence and machine learning approachable and compelling to those who didn't know anything about it, and then actually bring them on a journey to teach them more on their website and all of that. Fantastic example of wonderful brand storytelling.
That's amazing, because you usually don't associate a high-tech brand with a podcast, or like,
exactly.
Nothing that, somebody hasn't done it before. That's great. And do you have any, like, anything that you feel like, any brand that you feel like they, I don't know, launch a campaign that they didn't do so great? In terms of,
you mean what, companies that are not doing it that well?
Yeah.
Yeah. I won't mention anybody by name, but here's what I'll say, is that in many cases, just to the point of technology companies, what we see a lot of is resource centers, right? Where we see a resource center and it's really bad, right? And for example, you go into the resource center as a customer and you see things like, here's our white papers, here's our infographics, here's our audio files, here's our video files, where everything's sort of separated by content type. Mm-hmm. And it's ridiculous, right? Because it's not even really a good library. It's like walking into the library and the librarian goes, well, hardbacks are over here and paperbacks are over there. It's useless. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't even really fulfill the promise of being a resource center. It's just, here's a bucket of stuff and hopefully it's helpful for you. And instead, I'm hopeful that those brands that are creating resource centers can actually create a story. Why am I going into this section? What am I going to get out of this? What journey are you going to take me on? Educational, inspirational, entertaining. What journey are you going to take me on as I go through all your content, so that ultimately I want more of it. I want more of you as a brand. And that's mostly what resource centers for B2B companies are not doing very well these days.
These are excellent stories. And I can add quite a few names spring to mind. Like even like I'll tell you something, like for instance, Salesforce and Percut, like they're like content marketing strategy to help like salespeople. It's kind of like the opposite of what you're mentioning, and what we have been seeing, that some of the companies are not doing quite well. Well, Robert, thank you so much for sharing like so many interesting insights with branders, readers. This was a great conversation, and I'm pretty sure that marketeers and strategists will find it very useful. Before we go, can you please share with our audience where to find you, your website, social media, etc.?
Happy to. Thank you for that. I'm pretty easy to find on Google. If you Google me, I'm pretty good at owning the first page of Google, so I'm pretty happy about that. Beyond that, I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn, on Twitter, of course, where I'm Robert_Rose. If you just search Robert Rose on LinkedIn, you'll find me. And then, of course, my website is contentadvisory.net, www.contentadvisory.net. heroestartme.net.
Awesome. Perfect. Robert, thank you so much. We'll make sure to insert the links of your website in this interview. And this was excellent. We really appreciate your time. And thank you. And I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.